lawyer. Yeah, you do know. You do it in your everyday lives. Facts, authenticity, sincerity, credibility, having a relationship with the person that you are seeking to persuade. What doesn't work? Go back to the verse. If my people who are called by my name shall what themselves? Humble themselves. What is non-persuasive? Arrogance? Hypocrisy? Insults? How many of you have been married for more than a month? How many of you have successfully insulted your spouse into changing his or her mind? I've never tried. It doesn't work. I'll tell you what happens in my household. Number one, don't do it. Number two, South Carolina still recognizes the death penalty. Number three, what usually happens when someone insults you is you say, I don't care how right you are, I will never, ever admit it. Ever. That's what we're wired to do when somebody insults us. You can present all the facts you want to, but I'm never going to agree with you. So what makes us think it works in any other capacity of life? You may rally the minority that already agrees with you, but you're not going to persuade anyone with insults, and you're not going to persuade anyone with hypocrisy. There's one other thing that I think we ought to figure out how to do if we want to persuade, and that is inject this element of hope into our message. And there's no one in my line of work who does it better than our junior senator, Tim Scott. If you have not had a chance to hear Tim Scott speak, you should. Tim grew up in a single-parent household, raised by his mother, but his grandfather was also involved in his life. His grandfather was named Artemis. And every morning at breakfast, I shouldn't call him by his first name. Tim certainly wasn't able to. We'll call him Mr. Ware. Mr. Ware, every morning at breakfast, would hold up the Charleston Post and Courier and read it. Wanted his son to value current events. Wanted his son to value education. Wanted his son to be aware of his circumstances and the surroundings of life. So every single morning at the breakfast table, Mr. Ware held up the Charleston Post and Courier. And as I hear Tim tell that story, my own father did the same thing with the Spartanburg Herald. He would hold it up, and if you ask him a question, he might possibly deign to lower it to answer the question. But for the most part, that's where it was, out where God and everybody could tell he was reading the newspaper. The difference between my household and Tim's household is that Tim's grandfather couldn't read. He couldn't read up until 3 weeks ago when he was buried at the age of 94. But he had enough hope for his grandson that he faked it. And that's how you go from being a sharecropper picking cotton to having a grandson in the United States Congress. It's hope. So don't ever doubt the power of hope. You know it yourself if you've ever been to a wedding. My wife made me go to one last fall. That might not be the best way to phrase that. My wife and I went to a wedding last fall. Listen, if you want me to go to your wedding, don't get married in the fall. Not Southeastern Conference football territory. Just don't. So I told my wife I wasn't going, and she said, no, you are going to go to your sister's wedding whether you want to or not. So I went, and I was watching the game on my phone, but you cannot avoid that verse that occurs at every single wedding that's ever taken place. These three things remain: faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. We all know that, right? It's right before the unity candle or mixing of the sand or whatever takes place at that point. We all know love wins, right? But it got me thinking that hope must be pretty powerful, or it would not have even made the final three. these three things remain: faith, hope, and love. Do you communicate in hopeful terms? And if you don't, then you're not likely to be persuasive. So if you're in the minority and you believe that there's a code by which you should live, and you strive to be in the majority, you better tell people not only what you believe, but why you believe it. You better communicate it in a persuasive way. And thirdly, if you were waiting on Ronald Reagan or Abraham Lincoln or some great leader from the past to come lead a moral awakening in our country, you are going to have a long, miserable wait. This verse is not for presidential candidates. It's not for members of Congress, unless they happen to consider themselves part of my people. It is for you. And here's the good news for our country. It's the same you that gave us this country. Think back to how we came into existence. A ragtag band of mercenaries that decided to take on the most powerful army on the planet. And then think of what else we've overcome in our country's past. Brother fighting against brother in the Civil War. World War I, where how many of our young men died in Europe defending other people's freedom. And then that war to end all wars did not end all wars, and it gave us World War II, where more of our young men and women died on foreign soil, preserving other people's freedoms, some of whom don't always remember it or appreciate it. And then the Cold War. You remember when the Russians challenged us to see who could get to the moon first? How about 9/11? And what's persisted since then? It's totally changed our culture and how we balance public safety and privacy. We have overcome so many things in our country's past. And it wasn't because of the elected officials. It was the average, everyday Americans that this verse speaks to. So if you want that verse to come true, if your heart breaks for what you see in our country today, if you think that our moral code has either eroded or no longer exists, if you're worried about the prospects of November or the November after that or the November after that, then I want you to, as I read this verse one final time, I want you to know that it is not for me or Paul Ryan or Mitch McConnell or Nikki. It is for you. If my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, will forgive their sin, and will heal their land. God bless you.